Hey, we are living in the golden age of investing. I told you when I had that Roth IRA, I had to write a check every month to, that mysterious brokerage dude and send it in the mail and stuff like that. And then, they charged fees. I remember when Scott Trade came out and it only charged $8 a trade. So if you made a trade, you'd have to make at least $16 on the stock before you made 1 cent of profit. But I say that to say is start investing now. We are in the golden age. It doesn't cost anything on most of these platforms. If your platform does charge you something, you're using the wrong platform. And anything you put in now is just it's just going to be worth so much more in the long term. That compounding interest, it truly is the eighth wonder of the world. So start investing, keep investing, no matter how little it is. That's my big piece of advice.
Welcome, millionaires and future millionaires. You're listening to the Millionaires Unveiled podcast, a show where you'll hear the stories and interviews of everyday millionaires. We'll unveil their decisions, their strategies, and their portfolio allocation. Now to your host, Jace Mattinson.
Welcome back to another episode of the Millionaires Unveiled podcast. This is episode number 387.
This is the podcast where everyday millionaires spill the beans on their stacks of green. We're your hosts, Jason Stacy, ready to bring you the unscripted tales of wealth. This is the podcast where everyday millionaires spill the beans on their stacks of green. We're your hosts, Jason Stacy, ready to bring you unscripted tales of wealth. Join us as we dive into the net worths and asset allocations of regular folks turned financial titans. We promise our only edits are to be kid-friendly.
It is that time of year again. The time of year where everybody spends a lot of money on travel, on Black Friday, on all sorts of things for the holidays. Exciting time of year. And I'm excited myself. So we conclude another year, getting towards the end and into 2025. And with 2025, we have episode 400 coming up. Still looking for that 400 millionaire. So hopefully we will get a submittal on that soon. As always, we're looking for everyday millionaires. If you haven't heard your story, or even if you had, please reach out. Send us an email, millionairesunveiled@gmail.com. Schedule's open into Q2 next year right now. So I got plenty of dates out there and looking forward to interviewing some new millionaires. Today, we have Ryan. He's in the military. He's got a net worth of 1.1. However, he does have a pension that's probably valued anywhere from 3 to 5 million. So we talk a little bit about that and his path to retirement here soon. He is going to come up on his 20th year. And we talk about his kind of transition that he's planning in moving into possibly entrepreneurship or some other things. So going to be a great episode with him. And without any further delay, let's get right into it with Ryan. Ryan, do you want to just give us about your background or what you're up to now?
So, currently, I am in the National Guard. I'm an officer in the National Guard, and I work full-time there and have for the last 21 or so years. Just slugging it out until retirement.
Nice. Did you join the National Guard right when you graduated high school?
I actually joined in high school. I was 17 years old. So I tried to squeeze all the time I could out of it.
Good for you. And thank you for your service. So we're going to get into the details of the career trajectory and path. But before we do, what's your net worth today?
I'm sitting at $1,092,000. I know we have a bunch of listeners who did this as well, but once Mint went out, I had to switch apps, and so I switched to Monarch Money, and it does a pretty good job of tracking all your stuff. I'm a big fan of it. So shameless plug there.
Good.
I don't get any endorsements.
Good deals. Yeah. So newly minted. Did you become a millionaire this year or last year?
I became a millionaire last year. I was hanging around 900,000 for a long time. And then 2022 happened, and I also learned a very valuable lesson. Just because you have real estate that says that you have equity in that thing, you gotta watch out for that, because it's your house is only worth what somebody else is willing to pay for it. So I had a rental, and I found that out kind of the hard way once interest rates started rising.
I can't wait to hear that story. So how is the 1.1 broken up right now?
So is about 54% is investments. In so that's probably about 700,000 of it is investments. I've got a thrift savings plan. I've got Roth IRAs. I got my wife's Roth IRA, her 401k at work, and then I've got kind of an odd investment. My father-in-law's got a business that I invest in, and he uses working capital. So I have 100,000 invested with him, and it pays 10% a year. Over quarterly, which is kind of cool. So I can expect about $2,500 a quarter.
Nice. So the money that you have invested in the market between your various retirement and tax advantage accounts, et cetera, when did you start contributing to those?
I actually started contributing at 19. My grandmother gave me $3,000 as like a graduation present from high school, and gave one to me and one to my sister. My sister bought a sweet 1996 golden Honda Accord, and I opened up a Roth IRA. I'd been listening to some Dave Ramsey, like we took a financial peace class in high school. It was one semester, and I learned kind of two things: that debt is bad, and I should open up a Roth IRA. So I did that. I had no idea what I was investing in. I went with whatever my grandma's broker said to invest in. And later on, once I learned about assets under management fees, and I learned about just the expense ratios and how they only want to put you in funds that those companies own. Once I got wise to that, I pulled all that stuff out and then kind of switched brokerages, and now I kind of manage everything myself.
So you made that first investment. You remember, were you maxing it out at that time?
Oh no! And so max out, yes, I maxed out for that year because max out for the year was 3,000, and then I was putting $200 a month in. All right, so this is kind of real quick background on my story. So I joined the military in high school, and I did what's called the delayed entry program, where yes, I signed up and my clock starts as far as like years in service, but I didn't have to go to basic training till after I graduated from high school. So I graduate high school, and I was just burnt out on school. And so I'm like, I'm not going to college. I'm going to try to pursue this military thing full time. Well, I told you I joined the National Guard, but turns out if just everyone was 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year, nothing would get done. So we have a full time staff. And one of the cool full time jobs there was to do is the counter drug program. So we help bust people that are growing pot in the hills out in the state that I live in, and cooking methamphetamine, and all sorts of cool stuff. We would follow people around Walmart, watch them buy Sudafed, and then we are working with our state police at this point in time too. So the state police officer would be like, all right, I want you to follow this person. And granted, I'm 19 years old. I'm doing this, and this is like one of the funnest jobs I've ever had. Yeah. So we had some creative ways to get the drugs as well. Like, for example, some of them were in super hard spots. So we would rappel out of helicopters, cut stuff down, cut the marijuana plants down, bundle them up, fly back out with them, drop them in a field, burn them with diesel, call it a day. So I said all this to say is I delayed going to school. And while I was delaying going to school, I was an active duty soldier. I was, a young enlisted soldier, and but working for the National Guard. So I was able to put away $200 a month. And then at one point in time, my girlfriend, who is now my wife, convinced me that she wasn't going to marry someone that hadn't gone to college. So I quit that job, and I went to school. And that was one of my bigger regrets, is I didn't contribute anything until after I got stable employment.
Wow, what a journey. So every year since then, have you contributed?
I have contributed every year since. So once I commissioned, that was around 2009. So since 2009. So yeah. So I had about a 3 to 4 year gap where I didn't.
Okay. And is all of that's in those tax advantage accounts, is that invested in mutual funds or in index funds or bonds?
So over the years, I started off with the Dave Ramsey mutual funds and stuff like that. And then once I got on the FIRE train, the financial independence, retire early stuff, I went uh, I went all VU. VU is Vanguard's S&P 500 ETF, and that's a so everyone talks about VTSAX and all these and VTI, which is the total stock market ETF. If you look at it, VU outperforms it very slightly. They're almost the same, but the S&P 500 outperforms the total stock market at least over the last 15, 20 years. So that's my edge, and that's pretty much I'm 100% in equities. I don't own any bonds anymore. I don't own anything else. I own some small cap, but it's a very, very low percentage. And then in 2022, Amazon was down about 40%. So I bought a bunch of Amazon. So that's my only kind of individual stock that I own, and it has done well.
And when you made that switch, how long ago was that?
That was in 2018.
Okay, so you were kind of on the Dave Ramsey four types of mutual funds or whatever he tells people
Yeah.
until about 2018. And then 6, 7 years ago or whatever, you're switching over to basically everything's S&P or tracking the S&P, so to speak.
Yes. And so there's an interesting way that came about. So I was kind of burned out on my job, being in the military. I've deployed several times, and it's just they always ask a lot of you, don't give you resources, and that's fine. But I had an uncle. He retired from teaching at the age of 60, and he had a heart attack at 61, and he died. Then I had a aunt, and she was 59, and she was getting ready to retire from teaching like here in a month or so, and she had some like random brain thing and died. And then ultra tragically, I had another cousin. She was 32, was pregnant, seemingly healthy, and had some heart condition that was exacerbated by the pregnancy, and she died. So within like the span of a year, I lost three very close relatives. And I got to thinking, I got these weak genes, and I'm going to work till I'm 60, and I might get 5 years of rest, and I'm going to die. And I was like, well, this is stupid. I'm going to learn how to retire at the age of 55. I stumbled upon some dude named Mr. Money Mustache, and he retired, claims retired at 31. And I learned about the 4% rule, and then I went down the financial independence rabbit trail. And so when I did that, I learned that I looked at my assets under management fees I was paying. I saw the expense ratios for the different funds I was paying. I was in all of my funds were over 1% expense ratio. And so once I kind of learned all this stuff, then I pulled everything out of that, the banks or the brokerages I was using. I moved everything. I use M1 now. There's such I tried to do Vanguard, but good grief, is their website old. And so I moved everything to M1, and it's just much more user friendly. And I was able to pick all the ETFs that I wanted, and it just worked out super well. Don't pay any monthly fees or anything like that. Expense ratios are all super low. And so that's kind of how that happened.
So as you were thinking through this and having all these life events kind of transpire right before you, how did you arrive at 55 as being kind of that target all of a sudden for you?
It just sounded young enough and attainable enough. My mother-in-law kind of retired at 55. She, supported by her husband, but it just seemed like I was like, at least I'll get 10 years off or something like that. I don't know. I just picked a random number out of the air. I had no idea how much money it took to retire until I kind of learned about 4% rule, the Trinity study, and basically just kind of doing the backwards math of a lot of these retirement calculators. They're like, you need 80% of your income to live off of. And, where do they pull that number out of? The real number you need is 25 times your annual expenses. And it's very difficult for a lot of people to factor in their annual expenses because not everybody budgets or tracks those types of things. So now I really just pulled that number out of thin air. And once I realized it was a math problem and not just a an age equation, I was able to attack it a little more efficiently.
So where do you think you're going to land now at this point?
So, super cool thing about the Army is, yes, they will suck the life out of you, but you get this cool pension at the end of 20 years. And so, for all the financial independence nerds out there, let's say, for example, you wanted to spend $100,000 a year. Well, you would need to save $2.5 million based on 4% rule. But if you got a pension of $50,000 a year, well, now you can cut that number in half. Now I only need to save, $1.25 million. So fortunately for me, I have a pretty sizable pension in my way. And something that's not talked about with the military often is they have this thing called the VA disability rating. And the VA pays you based on different injuries that were service related that you sustained during your time. And so, given some of the surgeries I've had to have and injuries I've had from doing various things in the Army, you can go online, you can look at these calculators, you can see exactly how much your pension's going to be, and then you can kind of guesstimate how much your VA rating is going to be. And I take that total number and I see how much, I have saved and how much I could draw out of those retirement and brokerage accounts. And doing the math, I should be able to retire at the ripe old age of 43 and in theory, never have to work again.
So you're pretty dang close then.
I'm 5 years away. Yes.
But you've already hit your 20, right?
So yes. And there's an interesting caveat to that. So some of your military listeners might know this. There are two pensions in the military. There is one that is for reservists. So those that are the 1 week a month, 2 weeks a year. And then there's one for active duty. And the one for a reservist doesn't kick in until you are 60. And the one for active duty soldiers kicks in the next day you retire. So as soon as you get that 20 years, you get it that next day. And yes, I've got 21 total reserve years, but I've only got 15 active duty years. And so I need 5 more to get that good pension.
Oh, I see. Okay. So 5 more years you're in. And then, this is something that's come up a couple times, but your pension, that's not factored into that $1 million net worth, 1.1,
no, not
right?
at all. No.
So do you have an idea of what you've I know sometimes you have to play with it a little bit, but what do you estimate that probably to be worth for you?
Yeah. So looking at it online, it's between like $3 and $5 million. It all depends on how long you live and yeah. But once again, I try not to count my chickens before they hatch. I don't count Social Security in there. I don't count. I don't count anything that's. I learned a good lesson that that even that equity that Zillow says you have in your house, until you've sold that thing, and good grief, nobody ever factors in the friction cost of the real estate agents and fixing up stuff and things like that. So, yeah, until it's liquid, I don't count it.
Understandable. So, that pension though, granted, I hear you on that. On the other hand, I'm like, okay, 5 years, unless something crazy happens, you're pretty much set with that. And if there's anything as stable as a government pension, it's probably a military one, right?
Yes.
No,
it's true. They're not all pensions are created equal, but that's a good one.
Yeah. So, you add another 3 to 5 million on top of that 1.1, and 43, you're retired at a pretty young age. Do you plan on staying retired and effectively not working at all after that point?
So that was my original intent, just because I was burned out. But I've got the entrepreneurial bug, and I'm trying to get after it. I've got a couple things I want to try. I'm also looking to buy businesses and acquire them. I read a good book. It was called Buy Then Build. And it's saying that, everyone, it talks about how when you're setting up a business, there's a high failure rate amongst entrepreneurs. But if you buy an existing business, it already has a market and already has a customer base and it already has some things going. So if you can bring some things that, that make that business more efficient, just, right off the bat, you can grow those things and take it from somebody who may be tired of doing it or just, didn't have the vision or the foresight. So I've looked into buying a couple things. I've looked into crazy stuff like starting my own bourbon rick house and aging, charging people rent to store their barrels in my rick house. So I've looked at a bunch of different stuff, and that's honestly that I mostly want to retire because I just want to work on passion projects. I want to work on things that are exciting. I don't know, just kind of got burned out a little military. It's a great thing to do. Highly recommend it. But there's a reason why they let you get out at 20 years.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to hear about this equity in this house situation. So give us kind of the rundown of that and what happened there.
So in 2012, I bought my first house. In my wife, she wanted an all brick house, and she wanted to make sure it had a garage on the side and not the front, and a bunch of we wanted a space for a basketball goal and all this great stuff. Well, we ended up getting none of that. I bought a little tiny all siding house, but it was in the best location of the city that I live in. And this is 2012, and I paid what I thought was way too much for it. Well, 2022 comes, and I was looking at the home prices are just going nuts, and I was looking at what this thing was estimated for. So, like I said, I bought it for around $210,000, and its estimate is around $410,000. I'm like, all right, I'm doing the math. I have it as a rental house now. We moved out in 2016, and it's killing it as a rental. I'm charging $2,100 a month, and it's doing really well. But I look at it and I was like, man, I could have this money right now. It'd take me a good 17, 18 years to make that by raising rents, and who knows what's going to happen and stuff. So I was like, let's sell it. Well, at this time, I was actually deployed overseas, and so that was another mistake, is that I could no longer do the work myself. So I had to hire everything to be done, everything to be painted, landscaping, all sorts of easy stuff that I could take care of. Had to outsource it. I had to work with a couple realtors and some things like that, and it was so end up spending a good $20,000 to get this house in the perfect selling condition, because I had a premium product, and I'm trying to get a premium price out of it. So right when my tenants move out, they do the Fed does the first rate increase, and interest rates start to jump, and they continue to jump and jump. And so this house I have listed for around $400,000. I'm not getting any bites. I'm like, all right, let's lower it. $375. No bites. Fed raises the rates again. Piece of crap. All right, let's lower it to $350,000. No bites. So finally, I end up selling it for a little over $300,000, which is still great. Still super happy. Made a ton of money on it as a rental. I made a ton of money on it, selling it. But good grief, I just, the numbers I saw in my net worth, this is air quotes, were just not the actual things of it. And then, some of the listeners are going to be like, well, you had it way overpriced. And that is probably very true. That's why I say that until that money is liquid, it's only your house is only worth what somebody's going to buy it for.
Yeah, absolutely. Didn't a lot of us learn that in the last few years, that valuations and prices and all sorts of things can change overnight with decisions by others. No. So at this point, you're going to retire here and move into some entrepreneurial adventures. Is there anything else that you're kind of attaining to, whether it's net worth or anything down the road that you're striving for?
Yeah, I'm trying to hit some just some fun things. So I'm trying to hit $1 million of liquid net worth. I've got about 800,000 ish in liquid net worth, and so yeah, trying to get that up, and it should, just through regular compounding interest. And then really, I tell you what, I am nervous to pull off of these accounts, so I'm trying everything I can to increase pensions, to still increase cash flow, to see if I can't make other investments that pay out monthly, quarterly, or whatnot. Because I don't know, I'm just, when you get in that saving mentality and you've just been saving, it's hard to pull off of that. And I hear this with a lot of other people, and once again, most of my stuff is in retirement accounts. So in order for me to get to it, so right off the bat, my TSP, I'll probably move it. Most of it's in the Roth TSP, and I'll move it to a Roth IRA, which I should be able to pull out all the contributions to that. But I want to be careful because I don't want to pull out contributions to tax-free money because it's just so powerful. I might even look into the 72T rule of kind of annuitizing some of my other retirement accounts. I want to pull off of those. I didn't do a great job of building up my taxable brokerage account. So that's kind of my next phase is I've started to shift money from retirement accounts to the taxable brokerage account to just have that bridge from, 43, 44 to 59 and a half. And so building that taxable brokerage account, that's also my next big step.
And why take those actions? What does that do for you emotionally and kind of mentally?
Taking which actions?
Just going through all that and building that brokerage and kind of making some of those conversions and kind of just talk us through kind of your mindset behind all that.
So I don't do a good job of keeping a great cash cushion. And in looking at how the markets have reacted, before you go into retirement, it is typically advised that you have 2 to 3 years of living expenses in cash because the market experiences, down years, probably 2 out of every 10. And of course, you can never pick those 2 and when they're going to happen. But in order for me to kind of weather out those storms and not have to sell assets during a bad time, I want to kind of shift how I've done things. And like I said, most of my stuff has just been and putting them in retirement. And there's some psychology in there as well that I'd rather have things a little bit safer. And I know I got a lot of runway, and it's not necessary, but as it's starting to become more of a reality. I'm just thinking, I'm like, I want it to be as safe as possible.
How do you define safety in that context?
So in that context, safety for me is having that liquid amount of cash, preferably in a high yield savings account, so that I can ride out any storm. And I understand that the pension is going to be rather sizable, and it should actually replace 100% of my living expenses. But I'm also looking to give myself a little bit of a bump in retirement as well. That's not normally something people do, but it's just something I was interested in. I don't want to necessarily stay at this same level of spending. I know I'm going to be traveling a little more. So another thing I didn't tell you about myself is I got 3 kids. I'm married, and we are looking to put our kids in private school. And we're doing this more for kind of religious reasons. We do not have the greatest public school system where I'm from. And so I want them to have a good Christian education. And I'm looking, and that's going to be pretty expensive. So anything I can do to kind of mitigate some of these risks, that's what I'm going to try to do.
That's fair. So talk to us a little bit about the decision that you made at 17 years old to go pursue a military career.
So my next door neighbor was my recruiter. And I wanted to do like my life, super random stuff. I always wanted to do like politics, be a politician. I don't have that desire anymore. At the time, I wanted to do like missionary work and, go preach the gospel all over the world. And then the third thing I want to do is I wanted to join the military. And the National Guard was like the perfect thing for me. It's like a test drive in a car. You don't want to just go straight to active duty because you just bought that car, sight unseen. If you don't like it, you got to drive it for at least 4 years. Well, with the National Guard, worst case scenario, you're 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year. And for me, it was really exciting. We had some really cool units where I'm from. We had a special forces unit that allowed me to go to airborne school and jump out of airplanes and Then I joined an infantry unit and I got to go to Ranger school and a bunch of other fun things like that. That one wasn't really that fun, but it gave me some additional opportunities. And I was very patriotic, still am, still love my country. I think everybody should, do some sort of service. And it was kind of an easy decision. I got to serve my country, got to do a bunch of fun stuff. I've got to travel all over the world, see a lot of stuff, and it's been an awesome time for me in the Army for sure.
That's awesome. I usually ask this in rapid fire questions. We're going to start here in a second, but I'm just curious in terms of your kind of career trajectory. I mean, how would you rate your love and enjoyment of the career you've chosen?
So it ebbs and flows. And this is for a lot of people. So when I first joined, I did it for the love, did it for the patriotism and all that other stuff, and I loved it. And then kind of sticking out my middle term when I decided to move from enlisted to an officer, I did it more I wanted those leadership skills, and I wanted to be the leader. I was tired of letting somebody else make the plan, and so I wanted to be the one that was making the plan and executing. And then as I kind of got older in my officer career, I was in it for the money, and I saw the pension at the end. And it, contrary to popular belief, the military does pay well, and especially if you live in a middle to low cost of living area, you in for a substantial amount of time, you make very good money, and it's based also on where you live. We get a lot of cool advantages. You get basic allowance for housing, and it's based on where you live. So if you lived in San Francisco, you're getting a huge portion, and if you live in Podunk, Mississippi, you're probably not getting as much. But so the end of it was kind of for the money. And the other issue with the military is they've changed this, but I'm in what's called the high 3 retirement system, and it's a cliff pension system, meaning you do 20 years and you get your pension, or you do 19 years, 364 days, and just like in Willy Wonka, you get nothing. And so I'm in it for the long haul. I'm in it for that good pension.
Awesome. Well, let's wrap up with some rapid fire questions. What's the most expensive pair of shoes or pants that you purchased?
I bought a pair of Hoka One Carbon X shoes. They were $180. Don't know if you saw Eliud Kipchoge break the 2-hour marathon, but Nike made these super sweet shoes called the Nike Vaporfly 4% that had a carbon fiber plate in it that gave you more energy return. Well, they were all sold out of that one, so I was looking for some other ones, and I settled on those Hokas. And they're pretty sweet, but yeah, they're all right.
That's awesome. What about the most expensive meal out that you paid for?
Took my wife to Greece. We went to this restaurant in Santorini, which is an awesome island there, and it was 415 euros, and it was not worth it. It boasted the best view in all of Santorini, and every restaurant on that cliff had the best view. They all had the same view. So yeah, but it was a great experience. Highly recommend.
You paid for the view, not for the food.
Yeah,
that's great. What about the most expensive car?
I just bought my first new car ever. I bought a Ford Maverick, and it was $35,000. So previous to that, I'd never bought a car over $20,000 for a minivan, and before that, it was about $15,000. So yeah, so cars are getting a little more expensive.
Good for you. What about the most expensive trip or experience?
So our family super loves to travel, and we have an upcoming trip. We're taking the wife to Italy. I'm already about $3,500 into it. That being said, I'm a big travel rewards user. So, I don't actually know how much out of pocket I've spent. It's not a ton, but most of my trips are around that. But altogether, that trip will probably cost me another $2,000 by the time we're done with that.
That's the great thing about trips nowadays. I feel like you can kind of start spacing things out. It's like I can pay for the airline tickets one month, then I can pay for the hotel the next month.
It doesn't feel nearly as bad when you do it that way either.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not as bad as like, I don't know, I feel like in the olden days, and I say this like I'm that old, I'm not that old, but I feel like a while ago it was always like you basically had to book everything, you did everything in that month and it got charged in that month and it was big. But nowadays with online ordering and reservations and charging at the time of reservation and everything else, you basically can kind of space out the costs in a way. What's the dumbest thing you've ever wasted money on?
All right, so this was my bad, but I got in a car accident on my way to see my girlfriend at her college, and I had it. I just let the tow truck driver just tow it to hit the tow impound. I didn't know, like, so for all you guys listening out there, if your car ever needs to get towed, just have him tow it to a mechanic, because he charged me $20 a day to keep it on the lot. So I have a totaled car that's $20 a day on the lot, and I don't know any of this. So about a month later or so, I give this guy a call up to try to get my car, and it's like $700 something dollars. And this is like in 2006. I'm a super broke college kid, and then fast forward, he tows it to a mechanic. Altogether, it cost me $1,500, and then I drove it about 6 miles down the road, and it blows up like an actual explosion inside the engine, just smoke. And yeah, so I might as well just lit that $1,500 on fire. So
Wow.
it was not great, but it's good.
What's
Good lesson learned.
Absolutely. What's something you spent way too much money on, but you don't regret?
Oh, it's travel for sure. We we got Southwest companion passes, and we've been tearing it up. We've been going, yeah, all over the U.S., taking these kids everywhere, taking my wife and stuff. So yeah, travel, never regret it.
Okay. What financial habits changed the most since you became a millionaire?
So I eased up a lot on spending, because and I look at things as a percentage of net worth. So I'm like, is this really going to wreck my financial career if I make this purchase? Or same thing with an investment. Sometimes I'm like, oh, mark us down. I'll buy something like this. I was like, is this $500 I'm going to make worth my time doing this? So it would be I've spent a little bit more. That's for sure.
On that topic, what do you plan on spending more in retirement than you do now, or raising that budget, so to speak? Is it just all related to travel
It's
that you spend
mostly
more on?
related to travel. Yeah.
Start doing first class at that point?
Yes. So look into some travel hacking stuff, and yeah, we're definitely going to try to do some more first class experiences.
Awesome. What's the craziest thing you've ever done to earn money?
So I drove when I was in high school. A family friend of ours had a limousine, and he would go to these rich house parties, for like very prominent businessmen in the city that I live in, and he would drive them home in a limo, and I would drive their cars home. So I was driving like Mercedes SLK 500s, brand new Land Rovers and Range Rovers and stuff, and I'm following them, and of course, like, never let a kid do this because I'm 17. So I'd let them get ahead, and then I'd just punch that gas and just see what these cars had. It was a blast. Yeah, and then of course at the end of the night, they get out of the car and they tip you big because they're drunk anyway. And I was like, wow, this is a great job.
That's awesome. How did you make your first buck?
I mowed a lot of lawns. That was kind of my first thing. But then I worked at Wendy's when I was 15, and I was making $5.10 an hour. So that was kind of my first official W-2 job.
And you were how old then?
15.
15? Wow. Good for you. What's a key lesson you learned from childhood?
So something that I've kind of learned from that debt is bad, and also hanging out with family is a fun vacation. So I kind of like anytime I traveled as a kid, we always stayed with some family, and I was like, and I had a blast. And then as I got older, I was like, nah, we're going to stay in hotels, and we're going to, do this nice thing. And I still like to stay in hotels, but visiting family is a great vacation. And not only that, like, those relationships and those memories that you have are super important now that I look back on it.
What's a closely held belief that you once had that you recently changed your mind on?
So it goes to travel again, that I thought that I would like to go on vacation and just do nothing and just like chill out and stuff. But I learned that I need a purpose. My best trips I ever did were mission trips where I got to help people, build stuff, work directly for making people's lives better, or also trips that like I did some sort of race or triathlon or something like that. And so I find that I can't just like go to the beach and sip umbrella drinks and chill out. I prefer to have some sort of purpose.
That's awesome. Any last words of advice for somebody who's just getting started on their journey?
We are living in the golden age of investing. I told you when I had that Roth IRA, I had to write a check every month to, that mysterious brokerage dude and send it in the mail and stuff like that. And then, they charged fees. I remember when Scott Trade came out and it only charged $8 a trade. So if you made a trade, you'd have to make at least $16 on the stock before you made 1 cent of profit. But I say that to say is start investing now. We are in the golden age. It doesn't cost anything on most of these platforms. If your platform does charge you something, you're using the wrong platform. And anything you put in now is just going to be worth so much more in the long term. That compounding interest, it truly is the eighth wonder of the world. So start investing, keep investing, no matter how little it is. That's my big piece of advice.
Awesome. That's Ryan with a net worth of $1.1 million plus his $3 to $5 million pension. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Hey, thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to the Millionaires Unveiled podcast with Jace Mattinson. For more stories, investment opportunities, and information, check out our website, millionairesunveiled.com. See you next time when you'll hear from another everyday millionaire.